everyone, and welcome to Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. My name is Brandon Adams. This is Dog Nation's recruiting insider, Jeff Sintel, and we're back here again this week to talk about the latest developments with the 2020 recruiting class, and there are a lot of those to get to. Later on, we'll show you some of the really impressive highlights that UGA recruiting targets, and in some cases, UGA commits were a part of in their opening weeks of their senior seasons of high school football. Jeff will get into top targets. We'll update all of that. But if you don't mind, can we begin with a position that we've ended up talking about a lot over the last few weeks here on Before the Hedges? That's the tight end position. I think that conversation is with good reason because of the unique caliber of the athletes there in that group this year, the fact that Georgia is in the mix for so many of these guys, and there are a lot of developments with that position again this week, are there not?
Well, first of all, I would say good afternoon to you. Happy game week. We finally got some in-season stuff to talk about now. Thanks to everybody that made us through. Hopefully the Hedges program got you guys through during the off-season hiatus. But tight end's the big thing, Brandon. If you look, Georgia maybe has 7 at the most 8 spots left in its class, and they're going to probably try their darndest to pull at least 2 guys out of there. You know, I'm not a North Avenue trade school mathematician or anything like that, but 2 out of the remaining 8, we're talking about 25% of the remaining class at Georgia. And the news peg today is kind of simple. Cam Large, who was a pretty stinking good tight end, a 3-star, looked like he apparently got tired of waiting and wondering what was going to happen with all of his other schools, and he decided to go forth and commit to Wisconsin this week, which kind of thins the pool out a little bit and really sets up for Georgia 3 names. The Bulldogs have to pull 2 out of those 3 names to complete their tight end needs for 2020.
So let's talk about these guys for a moment. We'll get to Rick Gilbert, we'll get to Theo Johnson, but let me begin with Darnell Washington. Washington, too, released his top 3 earlier this week on social media, the Dogs along with Miami and Tennessee, and then you come on Dog Nation Daily on Tuesday, and there you see the edit from Washington showing off that top 3. You come on Dog Nation Daily on Tuesday, though, and say, well, maybe it's more than just these 3. Maybe Washington, according to some of the stuff that he said on Instagram Live videos, is also willing to consider Alabama, willing to consider Penn State. What I told you this week on Dog Nation Daily was, from the perspective of a fan who would like to see Georgia get Washington, the inclusion late, if that's indeed the case, for Alabama and Penn State is a big deal because Penn State recruits the tight end position well. Big Ten teams use the tight end position typically. It's not a surprise that Cam Large is going to Wisconsin, for instance. Alabama also has a history of, I would say, at least in high-profile situations, using tight ends more than Georgia does, and that's also an elite recruiting program. So if it's Georgia versus Tennessee and Miami for Darnell Washington, that's a very different handicap than Georgia versus those 2, adding in Alabama and Penn State, 2 programs that do recruit and have a history of using tight ends. So where do things stand with Washington on the release of this top 3, at least supposed top 3?
Well, first of all, I do think it's a top 3. I mean, logic would dictate, and I know if you asked everyone to look at this situation through their own, kind of non-tinted lenses, you would say, okay, young man has a top 3, puts that out on social media, then has some 8 to 10 hours later, he decides to add back in 2 schools. Those would be Alabama and Penn State. First of all, it might be the first time in history that a school has added in an Alabama or a Penn State late and in their recruiting process. Alabama is usually one of the final teams on the table and not one of those schools that gets added in as an afterthought or as a second thought. Simply put, Brandon, what I think is happening here is that Darnell Washington still wants to be well received for 5 official visits. And he went to 5 in his top 5, and probably means more than anything else that he wants to take an official visit to Alabama and Penn State outside of those 3 schools.
Well, how about his relationship with Georgia? Let's talk about that for a moment. In recent conversations you've had with Washington, he has kind of explained how it was that he kind of got used to liking UGA, living way out in Nevada the way that he did, and for him it's about the relationships he's developed with some of the players that he'll either be playing with or players that are on the current roster. Here's what Washington has told you in the past about that.
Just hanging out with the players, coaches, like I want to hear the facts, the real. I don't want, coach come in, they say this, say that, and then by the time I get there, it's not that. So I really want the real up front, and, they gave me the real. The players are there, I enjoy being with them, hanging out with them.
So listen.
Just, I don't know, yeah, that's pretty much it.
He drew me off sides there at the end. But he talks about the facts and he talks about the real. And I think that's an interesting way for him to describe that as being a tight end where guys like Washington and guys like Theo Johnson and guys like a Rick Gilbert, I think they're looking at Georgia, and in their mind they're trying to project, okay, because I'm such a unique brand of athlete for this position, if Gilbert even plays the tight end position, which we'll get to in a moment, because I'm such a unique athlete at this position, how can I project how Georgia might use me in comparison to how it's used these tight ends in the past? And listen, Georgia's got a lot of good recruiters. There are a lot of programs who also have good recruiters, and it's very easy for one of these good recruiters to say, yeah, you come here and don't worry about the fact that, what is it that Gilbert talks about? Just nothing but stick routes, little 5-yard turnarounds. Don't worry about the fact that all these guys, all they ever run is a 5-yard turnaround around a little stick route. We're going to have you doing all kinds of really cool routes. You're going to run the whole route tree from the tight end position. That's what Washington says he doesn't want. He wants the real. He wants the facts. He wants to be shot straight. And I do think it's an interesting way for him to describe that, just given the fact that Georgia would seem to be pitching to these guys, come here and we're going to use you more than we've used tight ends in the past.
Yeah, one of the things he made clear was he doesn't want it sugar-coated. He doesn't want you to tell me how great things could possibly be at Georgia. I think one of the things Kirby Smart does really well when he tries to translate his program to recruits is he says basically when the game's over, when we're not on the practice field, we're not on the game field, we're going to be Fonzie. We're going to be really, really cool, like Pulp Fiction, ice cold. But during practices and during the games, he says he makes himself out, and he says, I'm going to be a tyrant. We're going to try to squeeze the very best out of you, and then next year, it's my job to find better players than you to come in and try and take your job. Your job is to make sure that you make me look foolish trying to bring in better players than you every year. And when it's real and it's open and it's organic like that from the jump, I think players respect that.
Yeah, they do. Now, something else that players respect, we heard this from Theo Johnson, the other impressive tight end from Canada, when he talks about what he has liked about Georgia and the Dogs' effort to bring in a elite tight end of his caliber. Much the same way that Washington cited some of the player relationships that he has. For Johnson, this is specifically about his relationship with Todd Hartley, the Georgia tight ends coach. This clip is a little longer than a lot of the ones that we would typically play, but I do think it's pretty instructive of potentially not just how Theo feels about this, but maybe how Washington and Gilbert feel as well. Hartley is a rare find for Georgia as a tight ends coach, among the best at recruiting that position in the entire country. Georgia's presence as a semifinalist, if you will, for a lot of these guys would seem to be indicative of that. And Johnson put into words just exactly what his relationship with Hartley is like and why it's a gravitational pull that might eventually draw him to UGA. Here's Theo.
The academics are really good at Georgia. That's one thing that my mom has kind of drilled into my head, that's something that's really important, and that's something that I've been focusing on. So that's definitely something that is important to me. And one of the big things for me is with Georgia is my relationship with Coach Hartley. I think that's kind of the biggest thing for Georgia is my relationship. Like, obviously, like, Georgia's always going to be a top 10 team. They're always going to be like competing for a national championship. Really good team. Like, that stuff's all great, but like the relationships you have with your players and like the guys in your team and your coaches is really meaningful, because I remember somebody told me like alumni from some team, he told me that like when you're done playing and you're old and you see your teammates like getting married and stuff, like you're not going to be talking to your guys about like, yeah, you remember how nice our facilities were? You remember how nice our jerseys were? You're going to be talking about like, remember that one time we were battling it out fourth quarter in this game, or do you remember that one time we did this? Like, you're going to be remember like about the memories with your players, with the guys, the stuff you're doing. You're going to be remembering that stuff, not about the facilities or all that other stuff. So I think the biggest thing, like the best thing for Georgia with me is my relationship with Coach Hartley. I have a lot of trust in him, and I feel really comfortable with him.
I think it's impressive insight from Johnson, and I think it's cool for a Georgia fan to hear how much he likes Todd Hartley. Now, that's no guarantee that Georgia will win this recruitment, but I do think both in terms of how Theo can use a little wisdom to project how he'll eventually feel about his college choice is nice to see, and the fact that Hartley's making that kind of impact in its own right is nice to see as well. While that clip was playing, I saw where James Bryant also had an interesting comment in our Facebook comment section, and this is not to be funny, this is to be serious. That Johnson, a Canadian, plays high school football, obviously in his home country, and they do play Canadian League rules, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They play all kinds of things. You got The goalpost in the middle of the goal line, in the middle of the mouth of the end zone. The end zones are 20 yards deep. That way, if Joe Brandon Jr., 5-star, throws a 10-yard pass to the corner of the end zone on a double back shoulder, it's actually a 30-yard throw actually through the air. There's motion at the onset of the snap in multiple places, and then there's also that funny little thing about, and we get 3 downs.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Joel Moody, also in our Facebook comment section, was predicting big things for the current Georgia tight ends in the early portion of this season as a way of maybe impressing Darnell and Theo and Rick Gilbert, who we'll talk a little bit more about in just a moment. Is it as simple as that in your mind, Jeff? Do you think that Georgia has, with James Coley taking over as its offensive coordinator, we'll see him on Saturday night against Vanderbilt for the first time in that role, do you expect to see Georgia dialing up more tight end throws, and as I suggested, more intricate tight end throws as a way of impressing this next generation of prospect at that position?
What if Georgia's and James Coley's play script, Brandon, what if it looks like the best plays that Bill Belichick and Sean McVay could ever draw up for a tight end, and then everyone's wanting to come run these sophisticated, intricate tight end routes for Georgia? I think one of the reasons we went a little bit longer with that Theo clip is it's very introspective. It shows you what this young man is looking for. He makes simple points like, yeah, the weather's better here than at Georgia than in Windsor, Ontario, but that's not the main thing. Location is not the main thing. And being away from his extended family of brothers is not the main thing. I really love that part he said there, whereas you don't notice stuff. You don't notice facilities. You don't notice weight rooms. You don't notice gear. What you remember is that group of men that you bonded with and you bled with and you played with across your 3 or 4 years or 5 years of college football. That's what everybody's going to remember when they're all getting married and having kids and having reunions. And for Georgia, one thing fans should think about there is the players in the current class reaching out to Theo Johnson, trying to build that relationship, and also, simply put, the high stakes that the Georgia program is going to be playing in for the foreseeable future.
Jennifer Caldwell-Sperlin on the third member of this trio that we've talked about a good bit, Rick Gilbert. Jennifer asking, well, is Georgia or other schools strictly recruiting Gilbert as a wide receiver right now? I don't know about strictly recruiting, but I told you this when you joined Dog Nation Daily on Tuesday. The tweet from Terrence Edwards where he kind of made the pitch about how that he believes after working one-on-one with Gilbert, he could be a tight end or a wide receiver. Honestly, Jeff, and I'll be very clear about this, that is pretty persuasive for me. If you told me today, hey, I've got it on good word that Georgia has told Rick Gilbert he could play wide receiver, maybe a little bit different than Darnell and Theo because the kinds of catches that I've seen Gilbert make, not saying these other guys haven't been making those, it's just a little easier to see those for Gilbert. He seemingly is on TV more, and he's obviously in my home state. He catches the ball enough out of the tight end position. If Georgia recruited him as a wide receiver, now they'll have to find somebody to sort of bring the speed because that's not necessarily what Gilbert's going to do. But if Georgia recruited him as a wide receiver, I'd be fine with it. I would be fine with it.
Well, I think for Darnell and I think for Theo, I think the tight end designation belongs to both of those guys. For Eric Gilbert, I think the athlete designation probably should stick for perpetuity for Mr. Gilbert. Mr. Gilbert wants to be a receiver, or at least a heavy volume receiving tight end wherever he goes. What's the most Georgia could do feeding the ball to its tight end with mouths like the running backs, future George Pickens, future Dominic Blaylock, guys like that to feed? I think 35, 40 catches might be the norm, might be the maximum that Georgia could give any one single tight end. And when you look at Gilbert, most schools that are currying a lot of favor with him right now are saying a lot of flex in and a lot of pure wide receiver stuff. One thing I like to see, and one reason why we opened up this topic to kind of get the four wide shoulder to shoulder Talladega turn in our top targets every week, where we get so crazy and thick in the tight end stuff because of this guy right here. I think what we're doing here is we're showing that folks are talking about tight end. They want to know about the tight end position. And with the movement of large and what you have there with Johnson, what you have there with also Washington, I think Eric Gilbert, a lot of the love and a lot of the sizzle and the most impressive things about his game is he plays in high-level Georgia high school football. He's been a big-time player for 3 years now at Marietta. The other thing to think about is he's playing with an excellent SEC-level quarterback. These are things that no other tight end in the country has. And then the last thing you think about there with Eric Gilbert, and I'm going to basically tip my cap to a friend of this program, is that's Terrence Edwards. I mean, Edwards has been working with Gilbert for years, and folks, that's like the Mr. Miyagi of wide receiver stuff, tight end stuff. in the Southeast, much
Yeah.
less Metro Atlanta, much less the state of Georgia. Eric Gilbert's game has all that polish because of he's working with a true master of his craft in Terrence
You
Edwards.
see the tweet on your screen. The phrase that jumps out is matchup problem. Kirby Smart said, hey, if you want to be a tight end at Georgia that gets the football delivered to you a lot in the past, he said, you've got to be a matchup nightmare. I think Gilbert could be that. Now, Tramdog on YouTube asked an interesting question. So if he's not considered a exclusive tight end, does that mean that you stop, I hate to say it this way, but the spot that would have gone to Arian Smith, does that now go to a Rick Gilbert? In terms of the spot that Gilbert might occupy in the Georgia class, is this more about a Arian Smith spot, or is this more still comparing him to Theo Johnson and Darnell Washington in terms of there's not room for everybody you'd like to recruit, nor is there room for everybody you might be able to get? So whose spot is Gilbert potentially going to occupy? Someone like Theo Johnson or someone like Arian Smith, two very different players?
Yeah, I think it's all about what the program needs best, Brandon. And it's okay to talk about and say you're fine or anyone's fine with Georgia recruiting him or any school recruiting Eric Gilbert as a tight end, because he is going to be a matchup problem. The thing to think about there is he going to be for these plays you want to call for that matchup problem receiver, would you rather you throw the ball to George Pickens if you're Georgia there, or Matt Landers, especially if he flaps his wings very highly this season in 2019? Would you rather have a guy like a Justin Robinson out there? You got to sit there and think about, you just can't drop him in at wide receiver and give him these plays and let him be a matchup problem without thinking. It's not just the spot in the class. It's the plays you will eventually call. It's those 50-50 balls. It's those back shoulders. It's those balls where you want him to sit down in a pocket and be between his safety and in between layers of coverage. I think that's what you need to think about with Gilbert. If you recruit him on this board strictly as a wide receiver, well, Georgia's got 3 or 4 names there. 3 of them are already committed that are going to be pretty hard to knock off.
Since we've heard from Washington, since we've heard from Johnson, just to be fair and balanced here, let's also hear a moment from Rick Gilbert as well. Take a look at this.
They tell me that basically I feel that I'm a game changer like player, and that they want me to come because it will help the team like go to the next level, so they say.
Listen, that's an impressive young man, and I've made it pretty clear I'd love to see him at Georgia. I don't know, based on what you've written and spoken about, that Georgia's in as good a position for him right now as it might be for Theo and Darnell, but he's still a guy that I have high on my list, at least from the wishful standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's what we call around these parts a contested recruitment for sure. A lot of folks don't know what Eric Gilbert's going to do. Has Clemson made a move? It seems like Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia have been 3 constants in his recruitment. He's been to Georgia probably more times than Brandon Adams has done a sponsor read sometimes on some of our Before the Hedges programs. I mean, he's that type of player. He's very comfortable and familiar with what he sees at Georgia. The Notre Dame game will be vital in what he sees with the Bulldogs and their chances going forward. Gilbert, special player for somebody, but I think that one is a lot murkier than others.
Speaking of sponsor reads, let me remind you there's a great deal coming up at Kroger starting this Friday. You can earn 4 times the fuel points on gift card purchases between Friday and September 2nd. So getting you ready for kind of that Labor Day weekend coming up. Do that at your local Kroger. 4 times the fuel points on gift card purchases. Make sure you check that out. Later on, we'll see some of the top highlights from some of the guys that got their senior season started this past weekend. My guess is that Rick Gilbert might show up as a part of that here coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, here on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, it's really our staple of the week. We take a look at the movement for the top targets. Who does Georgia want the most? Who might want Georgia the most? And Jeff gives us his unique perspective on all of that. So without further ado, let's unveil it for this week. Top targets. And the number 1 name on the list, the 5-star cornerback, Keely Ringo. And Jeff, has anything changed with Ringo as of late?
Ringo's getting ready for his senior season. You see him working out in some scrimmages and also some first game action right there.
Any national games coming up for him?
I don't see one for him, but folks need to know about Keely Ringo. He plays for a program that perpetually wins a state title, including the last couple of years out in the state of Arizona.
Yeah, there you go. Number 2 on our list, just below Keely Ringo. The next name dog fans need to know about, Noah Sewell. And we had some unfortunate news about Sewell last week. The fact that, at least for now, his football action as a high school senior kind of put on hold by injury. What's the latest on that situation for Noah?
Yeah, so Noah, he's going to stay at number 2 here this week, while Ringo seems like a Casey Kasem countdown with so many weeks at number 1. But Sewell is a guy, he's had a foot injury. There's no need to risk it. There's no reason to do anything but go gingerly with this right now until region play shows up. His team, Orem High School in Utah, wants to win a state title. They're going to save their biggest silver bullet in their defense, so to speak, for the playoff stretch run for when he's fully healthy. He's got a lingering injury with his foot in a boot right now. A boot. Thing to think about there with boot. A thing to think about there with Noah. Some new information. We're always kind of talking to these young men each and every week, but Noah will be an early enrollee wherever he wants to go in the class of 2020. So somebody's going to get the services of Noah Sewell in January, which in my mind gives him a trampoline head start in terms of taking somebody's job as a true freshman in 2020.
Also a unique situation. One of the contenders for Sewell is Oregon. Oregon plays a neutral site game against Auburn this weekend. Typically that's not an opportunity to host recruits, and Oregon couldn't officially host Sewell is a part of that, but his brother is one of the top offensive linemen for the Ducks. I'm sure you don't know this, but is Noah going to be in attendance for this game? I mean, that's an opportunity for Oregon to impress him in a way that typical programs wouldn't have a chance to impress typical recruits if their brothers don't already play on the team.
Yeah, I think it just depends on what Noah wants to do in terms of getting ready, and since he's not playing, maybe he doesn't need to miss the meetings, or because he's not playing, maybe he feels it's more important for him to make those meetings. Got to remember, that's still a long way away from Utah. Sure, a lot of the family will want to be there to see Noah Sewell's older brother, Panay Sewell, play. He's basically $1 million backside protector for the Oregon quarterback, future top 10 draft pick in the NFL. And again, you can't host, which is kind of like what Alabama's doing this weekend with the game against ACC foe Duke in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You can provide tickets, but that's about all you can do. You can get a chance to watch the team play in some good seats in a neutral venue.
Top target number 3 in our list of top targets for the class of 2020. How about running back Zachary Evans? And as I've told you already this week, Jeff, I found it interesting that Alabama, who's at least one of the public finalists for Evans, although not thought to be one of the chief competitors to Georgia, they took a running back commit this week. A 3-star prospect out of Destrehan, Louisiana. That would, to me, seemed to indicate Alabama doesn't think it's getting Evans. Does that change the calculus on this recruitment for you?
So one thing about the calculus of this recruitment with Evans is another guy that's going to enroll early, by the way. I'm going to try and share that every week with folks who want to know. I know a lot of people on our Dog Nation forum want to see a kind of dedicated list about that showing up every week, and we're working on that. But I think the thing with Edwards, and as it relates to Evans, is very interesting. We spoke on the world-famous program Dog Nation Daily that is known and beloved by many this week that they have, Alabama has different taste when it comes to elite prospects so far in the 2020 cycle. And Edwards is a very good player. Edwards is a guy I saw a lot last year when I went to go visit John Emery Jr. When he was a Georgia commit and a Georgia target out of Louisiana in Destrehan. But to me, he doesn't seem like the higher echelon player that we all feel Alabama gets all the time. To me, it reminds me, Kyle Edwards, no disrespect whatsoever, but kind of reminds me of some of the running backs Georgia has looked beyond over the last 2 or 3 cycles inside the state of Georgia, inside that fence around the state of Georgia, to go shopping in other states for other players. I think the one thing here with Alabama and running back recruiting for 2020 here, which must be said, is how in the world was Alabama not a factor for Tank Bigsby? When you look at a player like that and the recruitment and the commitment that they just took from Kyle Edwards, and now Tank Bigsby is going to Auburn, whew, that's one of those that makes me wonder how in the world Tank Bigsby, if he didn't end up at Georgia, why was he not at an Alabama instead of an Auburn?
Alex Polonis says Evans is going to be a dog, so he's obviously still confident. There was last week all these rumblings about the fact that Evans might commit during the show or something crazy like that. A lot of folks even thought you might be in Houston to cover it throughout the rest of the week. That didn't happen. Seems like a lot of that talk maybe dematerialized just a little bit. Have you seen anything in the last week that would tell you to tell Alex Polonis to dial down his enthusiasm about the eventual Evans pledge to UGA?
Well, I do think there should be enthusiasm in regard to Evans on that subject. When you hear these rumblings and then they don't come to fruition, you got to make sure who you hear the rumblings from, and also you've got to make sure that when things don't happen, that leads to some indecision behind the scenes most likely. And for those that, like myself, that feel that this is going to be a very, very tough recruitment, like trying to get past Mike Tyson in his prime for whoever wins this thing for Zachary Evans. This indecision, and it seems like people say, well, look 2 more weeks, look to this week, look before this game, look before that game. Just shows you folks, there's a lot of bumps in this ride with any recruitment of a player the caliber of Zachary Evans. And it's really funny, Brandon. I think last year, if we had to put our finger on the pulse of maybe the most popular recruiting topic for last year, had to be Hazelwood, right? For Georgia, had to be, what's going to happen there with Hazelwood. Can Georgia get the Clay Webb story was big, the N'Kobe Dean story was big, but it seemed like Hazelwood just grabbed a lot more attention. Everybody would also wonder about Nolan a little bit too. But to me, I think for the rest of this 2020 cycle, there are two things that have absorbed everyone's attention right now. Number one, it's the tight end thing, and that encompasses three very big names. And number two, it's Zachary Evans. What's going to happen with Zachary Evans? That's the question. Anywhere I go, anytime we're out in public, that's the question. Zachary Evans. And folks, they really want Zachary Evans to play for Georgia. They're like Brandon Adams on an early morning Dog Nation Daily. They dispense with all the pleasantries and they go, tell me what's happening with Evans.
Yeah, no doubt. Next name on our list, top targets for the class of 2020, climbing up the ladder after naming Georgia his top three. Darnell Washington, as high as he's been, all the way up to number 4. Now, we just talked about Washington a good bit, but give me your thumbnail sketch on why he moves up this high.
Well, number one, he names a clear top 3, and despite what happened with after the fact or a revision or a script rewrite on his top 5, that top 3 I think looks very good for Georgia. We covered a lot of tight end talk during the open to our show. If you're just joining us right now, go hit that up on a later review of the program. But with
always remember too, if you watch the show on YouTube, you can start the show from the beginning while it's still going on. You can't do that on Facebook, but you can do that on YouTube.
Very technical, Brandon. That's the type of things I've come to expect from you. Once every year, you give me a technological miracle. Darnell Washington, what else can we say very quickly to keep this hurry-up tempo going for my man Brandon? Darnell Washington will not be in an early enrollee, so wherever he shows up, he's going to show up in late May or early June.
All right, looking forward to seeing that. Next name, top targets, the class of 2020. Here's part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Arrow down next to the name of Jordan Burge. I think that's probably got more to do with the ascension of Washington than it does any kind of downgrade from Burge, if I had to guess. A lot of folks also got a chance to see Burge on TV this past weekend, I believe. I think he's getting on TV, I think. Nonetheless, what can you tell me about Jordan right now?
Do I have you folks, good people out there? Can we go trust tree for a second? Can I go give me the ability to just be a football guy watching football and watching tape?
Hold on one second. Connor, cut the music for this. This sounds like it's about to get serious. All right, go ahead, sir. The floor is yours.
What are we going to play?
I'm like Ravishing Rick Rude. Cut the music.
Are we going to play some King James in the background as I say this?
No.
But here's what I'm going to say. If you look at the film, you were not enthused by the way Jordan Burge played. You didn't see him play like he was one of the dominant players in the country. First of all, in his defense, they got him playing all over the place. He was lined up as a wide receiver at some points, being covered by Ohio State 5-star wide receiver commit Julian Fleming. It did not seem like his work rate and the plays that he was or was not making on film in a preseason scrimmage game or whatever you want to call it, preseason opener, whatever you want to call it, did not seem that was befitting the nation's number 1 or number 2 overall prospect.
Well, don't be a wet blanket.
I'm just saying.
He's playing wide receiver. You just said so. He's playing like 50 positions.
Yeah, he is.
I didn't even see the game.
But when it came time to make the plays on tape and to get a chance to produce some of those viral highlights, a lot of folks even went down and dirty in the Dog Nation forum about this as well, is that Jordan Burge, although he has all the potential in the world and everybody sees where everybody's projecting him to be, that was not a dominant opening game for the number 1 player, number 2 player, 3 player in the country.
Well, it sounds like he needs to get coached up. So he's going to come to Athens and get that. Next name, top targets, class of 2020. Just below Burge, Theo Johnson, climbing the list a little bit here. Jeff, arrow up on Johnson. Why is that? Is this the Todd Hartley, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen tweet?
Well, there hadn't been any tweets in a while, so people are kind of wondering what in the world
I was sort of hoping you'd give us like a Kobe Shaq, a Magic Johnson, James Worthy. Who? Kareem, no, Worthy. I'm too old. I'm too young to have seen Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in his prime.
What about some Twin Towers action with Akeem Olajuwon, going forward with that?
You wonder it was Connor that was shouting off camera on that.
Connor usually is the one that shouts off camera. Theo, just when you talk about upside,
what if he went like pro wrestling, like Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson? If he did that for his next sort of cryptic super team tweet, I'd lose my mind.
Hold on, let's be clear. Let's be fair and balanced to all of the 3% of our pure hardcore wrestling listeners here. If we're going to go greatest tag teams of all time, doesn't it begin and end with the Road Warriors?
Probably so, but that's also an obvious choice. So it's kind of nice to go below obvious.
So you're talking about when Steamboat would tag team wrestle with Ric Flair? Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's just. But I'm saying, Road Warriors, Legion of Doom would be a good choice, but it's also kind of nice to go. Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, something along those lines. It's not quite as obvious.
What about the tag team with the Junkyard Dog and Hulk Hogan, which appeared in early WWF?
Special attraction tag team's not exactly what I'm looking for.
Oh, man. Let's move on.
The point is, what is even the point? Oh, why is Theo Johnson moving up?
Theo Johnson. I think when you look at everything on film and you look at the scouting ability, remember, folks, it's not how good they are right now. It's how good they can be in 2021 or 2022 or 2023. And I think should Theo Johnson get all the polish he needs to and all the reps, remember his weight has went from two.
Well, how are you going to give him it's how good he's going to be in 2022 and you over here grading Birch on a harsh curve?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, at least keep it consistent. Can we do that?
Okay, there's a difference between Theo Johnson being rated as the number 125 player in the country and Jordan Birch being rated as the number 3 player in the country.
Well, it sounds like they're overworking him out of position. Suspect coaching coming to Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay, here's my point. I'm gonna unravel the wrestling threads here. I'm gonna make a clear point. Theo Johnson has the athletic upside to be a special player in the NFL.
Fine enough. Next name, top targets for the class of 2020. Elias Ricks going down here a little bit. What's the latest on Mr. Ricks, the LSU commit, by the way?
In some way or fashion, the ascension of others needs to be like a tiny, move back, a 1/2 step back. Ricks had another pick six for his season opener
against IMG. On, by the way.
He's got a career of making so many pick six, so much, Brandon, that they're starting to call these plays like these ones you see right here. It's a Rick six, not a pick six.
I like it,
but a Rick six.
I like it. I think one of our commenters actually even coined that phrase.
How would you like to see the Rick six in red and black?
I would like that. Now, the question we keep asking you on this though is this realistic that Georgia can flip a defensive back from LSU here?
I think what's happening here is Ricks is the type of player that you'd make room for in any class. And let's be real on Elias Ricks. Let the first visit, let's let him get in Sanford Stadium and feel the magical glow of whatever happens that night with the red fourth quarter Krypton fanfare debut or whatever's going to happen with that. Let's let and see that happen, and then let's figure out if some kind of move happens for the Georgia Bulldogs on a key visit.
Just below the LSU commit Ricks, we see the next name on our top targets for the class of 2020. It's Zykevius Walker, one of the rare in-state guys to show up on this list. I guess he and Gilbert are going to be the only two there.
You think Gilbert's going to be on this list?
I'm assuming he will be. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm assuming he will be. What can you tell us about Walker here?
Okay, Walker is another guy that I think is just starting his senior season. You're going to see a lot of important tape that's going to come out of Walker about how he plays at 270, 275, 265.
What does that project to weight-wise in college?
Man, I've got a metric. If you're already over 250, 255, in high school, that means you're outside of being an edge player. It means you're very likely to have your hand on the ground and be a defensive end or a defensive tackle, most likely a 3 or 5 technique.
Yeah.
Very important for Walker. I think his stock has been raised with Georgia over the last 2 or 3 months, which will be very interesting to watch. Walker is another young man who should make a lot of key important official visits. I think he wants to take his official visits in the fall, much like a lot of the guys on this list, before he makes final determinations with his list and his eventual college choice. And the last word I'll have there on Zykevius Walker is he's another guy that will enroll early out of tiny Schley County.
Nice.
The folks are getting it down in Ellisville.
Let's it was Sly County.
Sly County. Those that tiny school down in Ellisville, those folks are getting it done with early graduation from one of their best prospects of all time.
Great job down there. Next name, just below Walker, the impressive defensive lineman. Now we get to the other Georgian, Rick Gilbert. At this point in time, speaking from the perspective of a Georgia fan who wants him at Georgia, I'm just glad he's still on the list.
We talked a lot about tight ends. Eric Gilbert is a very special player. One other thing I can add to throw in there, my latest information, you're going to laugh about this story. Can you go ahead and get a good laugh queued up for Brandon? Gilbert has the ability to enroll early.
Okay.
He will be prepared to enroll early, but it's still up in the air whether or not he will go or choose to or go his entire senior year.
Oh, wow. Are you kidding me off the top here? No, that's an incorrect use of...
No, here's what I mean by that. Even that is not cut and dry with Eric Gilbert. That's what I'm saying.
Why, if you could be an early enrollee, why wouldn't you be? What kind of... Does he play another sport?
He does not.
I'm not sure about that.
Most likely,
I'm not
if
sure
you've
about
done
that.
the work to enroll early and you can enroll early, most people decide, yep, I'm going to go get better and go start getting better in college football and make that transition. All I'm saying is that he will have the ability to enroll early, but that decision has not been firmly made yet.
Yeah, listen, unless you're Trayvon Walker and you're winning a state championship in basketball and you're a tremendous field athlete in the spring, unless you're doing something like that, if you can be in college, you need to, whether it's Tennessee, Clemson, Alabama, or wherever. If you can be in college, you need to be.
And Georgia. Make sure you throw Georgia.
No,
in
I'm
there.
saying, what I'm saying is I'm not just saying that because I'd like to see him at Georgia. I'm saying, that you need to get your mind right and get in school and get yourself ready to play.
Yeah, Brandon's point is made loud and clear. I hope you guys get it. I don't know any red-blooded American males that are 18, 17 years old, and they give them a chance to say, hey, would you like to come here and live now, or would you like to wait another 6 months before you come out here and go to college?
So that's a very interesting point. Next name on the list, number 10, the second committed elsewhere player to show up here, Gervon Dexter out of Florida. It seems like even after Dexter said that he was, cutting this stuff down and going, he is, still back at Georgia. In fact, is this a recent tweet here, the Georgia uniform on?
Yep.
Didn't see this one. This is kind of interesting. So much for his recruitment's all over with. He's wearing the black Georgia jersey on Twitter. That would certainly seem to me that he's not exactly completely done with his recruiting. Actually, I'm not even sure what I'm looking at. What even is this?
So what it is, and this is what happens in the world of recruiting these days, and God bless those graphic artists that are now gainfully employed because of the hype and craziness of college football and big boy recruiting. But the players, the elite players in the country get one of these every week, and if we can flash back to that, see how it says beat Kathleen? Well, that was his opponent prior to the Friday night game.
We should make this very clear. Kathleen is the name of a school.
Name of the high school. And
we should make this abundantly clear.
For folks that are looking about impressions made on edits, I would say that the University of Georgia edit there is going to hold up very well in the head-to-head comparison with what's going on with Florida and Florida State right now. The one thing about Dexter that we want to add to the discussion is there's basically one school that consistently tries to recruit Mr. Dexter and is always keeping up the lines of communication, saying we'll reserve a spot for you, even in the midst of all of his chatter about Florida, and that would be the one university in Athens, Georgia.
Yeah, there you go. Good stuff to see. How about the guys that just missed out on being top 10 targets for Georgia this week? A few names to get to on this list, including one who I know has been pretty active about Georgia on social media as of late. Jacoby Cowan's on this list, Jay Hardy, the two defensive linemen, defensive backs, Nadab Joseph, Avante Williams continue to be here, Arian Smith, who we've been on the lookout for. But it's Ashad Johnson who has tweeted a bunch about Georgia as of late. He's a high school teammate of Cedric Von Prawn, is that right?
That's correct. That's
correct. So what's going on there? Because he has certainly been pretty vocal about UGA lately.
He continues. He's touting a lot, doing some media now about Georgia is his leader. Those two have wanted to play together for the longest time. Nation's number 11 running back, number 125 overall prospect, about 6 feet, 200 pounds. Now, there are things going on around the globe right now with Mr. Johnson about potential blue shirt. How does Georgia wedge him in the class as another running back? Is that possible? Is that an insurance policy for Zachary Evans? We have reached the point where the nation's number 11 running back and the number 130 overall prospect, folks are even wondering if he might be a blue shirt candidate at the University of Georgia. Mm-hmm. Folks, 5 or 6 years ago, this was one of the bell cow recruits for the University of Georgia. My, how times have changed.
So, honestly, compels me to ask, a lot of times when we see these high school teammate situations, it's something of a nod to the player that's already in the fold. Is this a separate evaluation of the running back here, Johnson, or is this something that maybe Cedric Von Prawn would like to see happen?
Well, I think it's you got to vote. You got to sit here and think. Georgia, with so many issues and guys it needs to recruit in the class, they're recruiting a player because they feel there's strong interest that he could help the program there. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's so much keeping the kettle pot burning or keeping some warmth underneath with the stove eye right there. I mean, Johnson, you look at his film, he can really play. And there was some point where most folks in Louisiana thought that Johnson would be the catalyst that would be the spark that would get Cedric Von Prawn to flip or to turn his eyes towards the LSU Tigers, and it looks like clearly that's not happening right now. Mm-hmm. Another thing that crosses my mind is, again, with Alabama taking taking the players in the class that they are. As Rashad Johnson is another guy that I think could really fit in well a lot of SEC backfields. And for Georgia, for any situation where Georgia might take an Rashad Johnson, I think it's fair to say that maybe some of the preferred targets, maybe some of those on that list above him, they didn't pan out, or also Georgia found a way to get very creative with its scholarships for 2020.
With the idea of a blue shirt in mind, is he a better running back than the 2021 potential names are?
Evan Pryor is really good in the 2021 class, and you always got to look at that if you want to go 3 deep in one class because the next year's class is not that strong. Right now, those evaluations are kind of, you've got to really see great junior film out of those guys to determine whether that kid is going to be better than a 2021 standing senior season. With a case like Pryor, I think Pryor's a little bit better than Johnson, and he really likes Georgia. I think Evan Pryor out of North Carolina will be another name to think about for 2021.
Bubba Smith says, Jeff, how many of those top 10 that we just saw can Georgia actually sign?
Well, they could actually sign all of them. It would just mean some attrition.
What's a realistic number without getting more specific about the names? 7?
I think 6 to 7 sounds about right.
7 sounds better than 6.
9 sounds better than 7?
Well, no, I don't think it's 9.
There's some names in there that you got to sit there and wonder about how many 560-foot home runs can Georgia hit in this class.
And there are also a couple of those guys, too. It's like they probably cancel each other out. I mean, would Georgia get Zykevious Walker and Javon Dexter, for instance, in the close?
That's a good point.
You know, Jordan Birch kind of factors in there. So some of these guys would actually negate the arrest. Hey, it's Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. That's Jeff Sintel. I'm Brandon Adams. Let me tell you about a really cool thing happening at Kroger starting today. You can download coupons at Kroger.com or in the Kroger app to redeem starting this Friday through Labor Day on Monday. All your Labor Day cooking items, you can save on those, including Smithfield bacon, condiments, Kings for charcoal, and of course Betty Crocker cake mix for dessert. So start saving on that. Download your coupons today for savings this weekend and all throughout Labor Day weekend at your local Kroger, Kroger.com, or the Kroger app for more on that. All right, we've got our weekly six-pack coming up. Jeff will try to stump us with some trivia questions. Before we get to that, though, can we take a look at some kind of cool highlights that were online and available on social media, coming off some debuts for senior seasons for some of the top 2020 targets for Georgia? I want to start with this one. Marcus Rosemy made what I thought was a very impressive one-handed catch. You and I talked about Rosemy earlier this week. I thought your piece at DogNation.com involving Rosemy was terrific. You know, Jeff, the point that I keep making about him is this is a guy that I think probably fares more, compares more favorably to some of the elite receivers we talked about with the 2019 class than maybe I've been giving him credit for. I thought your piece was a step in the right direction in terms of giving him some of the attention he probably deserves. I hope folks check that out at DogNation.com. I love this catch, though.
First of all, I got to give credit to the throw. That was an incredible throw by the quarterback there at St. Thomas Aquinas. Folks, that is a Grayson or Valdosta level program in the state of Florida. They play big boy football. They feel that Marcus Rosemy is one of the finest human beings and football players they've ever came across. Marcus Rosemy cannot enroll early. Sounds like he's going to make his official visit for the Kentucky game. Why? Because that's the off week for his St. Thomas Aquinas team. Well, he'll have the ability and freedom to do so. Going to be very hard because I put in that piece at the very end. There are 14 receivers rated among the nation's top 75 prospects this year. And a guy like Jermaine Burton doesn't even have his 5-star. And then it's who moves off? Is it Julian Fleming? Is it Damon Demas? Is it Rakeem Jarrett? I think Rosemy is right there in the mix, but the thing is, for him to get his 5th star, he has to be one of the top 32 players in the country, and that's going to be very hard to do, even though he's right around 40, 39, 38 right now.
Tough to crack that.
The most honest thing I can say when I try to give an appreciation for Rosemy and his skill set is simply this. When he gets to Georgia, I think he will immediately become, in 1 or 2 weeks of practice, one of the top 6 receivers at Georgia.
Of all these 2020 recruits, you have been as high on Rosemy as anyone. You've really touted him for quite some time. Now, speaking of big-time throws, you mentioned that a moment ago. I thought Carson Beck made one of those this past weekend as well. Some folks saw this streamed on a local TV station there in the Jacksonville area. Beck, who probably didn't have the world's greatest summer on the camp circuit, Elite 11, the opening included, certainly looks the part here with this big throw. He's thrived in 11-on-11 competition before. Maybe overall a little less talented team for his senior season than he had last year, but he's certainly making big throws right there.
Yeah, first of all, let me give you something that maybe even that smart guy at your tailgate really doesn't know about Carson Beck yet, and that's this guy, much like Phil Mickelson on Twitter, he loves to throw bombs. he likes to look at that. And his season opening stats, he went 10 of 18 for 223 yards with 2 touchdowns. Both of those were pretty much bombs. And then the second thing, he had 2 interceptions early. The thing that I liked about him was the way he ran the ball. He got some big first downs and showed a lot of mobility to move the chains. 6'4", 225. He will be in Athens in January.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Gary Shepard, watching along on Facebook right now, said, BA, you going to be in Nashville this weekend? I'd love to meet you. See, this is what I'm trying to tell you. We got to do the very first ever Dog Nation pub crawl, Dog Nation caravan. Most of the things we do kind of rhyme with nation in some respect. I can't really quite make this one rhyme. This is going to be a really fun thing. Are you on board for this weekend? Hey, come see us Friday on Broadway. Just let folks know we're going to be, and just kind of you know, kind of a casual, kind of low key. You know, not an officially sanctioned Dog Nation event. We got a couple big ones coming up this season, which Kroger's going to be a part of. I can't tell you about those yet. But how about something just kind of casual? Can you do this on Friday?
We'll go find some.
Nashville?
We'll go find some live music. We'll go find some hot chicken, some Nashville hot chicken. Is that what you want to?
Yeah. Now be clear. He's saying hot chicken. That's what he's saying. Yes, that's a local Nashville delicacy. He's not talking about the bachelorette parties. Why are you so non-committal?
No. I don't
understand.
I'm just laughing how you make.
You're typically you're more of a man of the people than I am. You're the one that wants to be out in the crowds most of the time.
Brandon, let's make it happen. Let's make
finally,
this the best.
Finally, you've been coerced into saying yes.
No, I'm not coerced. I kept saying, should I say the phrase, I'm all in, Brandon, but that might make you throw up on this laptop where the battery is still working at this current time.
What is that, Clemson's phrase?
Yeah, you know that.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm not worried about that.
We're going to attack the pub crawl.
So for any of you who are going to be around Nashville, this is going to be casual. This is not an official event. I won't have a microphone in my hand, in other words. We're just going to be hanging out and having a good time, but we'll be more than happy to tell you where we are. So keep it close to all the various social media channels. Jeff Sintel on Twitter, @DogNationDaily on Twitter. We'll tell you more about that. For now, though, let me show you Tate Ratledge here absolutely mauling somebody going back to this. Oh, no, this is not mauling.
He's mauling at football.
Hey, look at this. I think every punter should be at least 300 pounds.
Look at that. With the knee braces and everything, I think this one carried 55 yards. I remember
he looks like Andy Reid in that punt, pass, and kick thing. You ever seen that video of Reid where he's like 2 feet taller than everybody else? So y'all know what I'm talking about. You've seen this video, right? You've seen that, right?
I've seen that. The thing I would be, I would pay the price of admission to see somebody try and put in a punt block in on Tate Ratledge sometime in single A Georgia football this year. Look at that. The form looked a little bit like Ray Guy. And remember, folks, punter. Jalen Carter also punts for Apopka, Florida as well. But the other thing to think about there is his net average is right around 40 yards.
That's good to know. All right, so Benjamin Taylor, I got to steal this. So I've said before, a lot of the stuff we do kind of rhymes. You know, we've had like Dog Nation Invasion, which doesn't quite rhyme, but it kind of does. We've got a big Dog Nation Invasion coming up later on this season. So we've got, things that kind of rhyme. Benjamin Taylor says, what about Dog Nation Libations?
Ooh.
I like that. Can we use that, Benjamin?
Libations
Can I get a
with Dog
service
Nation?
mark from you to use that one for Dog Nation Libations?
How about Libations with Dog Nation?
No, that's not we have a format. We have Dog Nation Libations. Dog Nation Appreciation. We do a lot of things that kind of rhyme.
Are we talking about some of the brown water there, Brandon? Is that what we're talking about?
Listen, you never know. I'm not making any kind of commitment one way or another. So, Benjamin, if you're willing, and I think technically under the terms of service, by putting that in the comment section, you've now ceded intellectual property over to Dog Nation. We're going to do Dog Nation Libations this Friday from Nashville. And Benjamin, if you're going to be there, we'd love to come. Jeff will buy you a drink.
We will do that. If you show up, I will buy you a drink, sir.
All right, let's do some more here. How about a Rick Gilbert, big-time performance from him. Marietta, one of the top programs in the state of Georgia, and Gilbert's got some good-looking stuff. Can you tell us more about that?
Eric Gilbert, Harrison Bailey goes, all right, I'm looking for my coverage. Let me look there and put it in the back of the end zone. Shout out to Southern Swag Jr. for giving us this tweet and giving the world this tweet. But one-handed catches, and Brandon, can I say this?
Does anybody make two-handed catches anymore?
First of all, they all practice it. They do it before. OBJ has basically set the receiver position fundamentals back about 6 years.
Yeah, you watch like Godwin and Hardman last year. They're almost like your dad playing catch in the backyard, like baseball. They catch one hand, they throw with the other. I mean, they literally only practice one-handed.
So one-handed catches, while they don't blow the skirt up, so to speak, for a lot of folks, one-handed catches by a flex end that weighs 250 pounds at 6'5", that one catches my attention.
All right, speaking of catching your attention about Kendall Milton, his team was on ESPN2 late Saturday night. I fell asleep on the couch before this happened. I'm not going to lie to you about that. but he does find the end zone, little dive there at the end. That's keeping up that RBU legacy pretty good there in Clovis, California for Buchanan against a nationally ranked foe.
Well, here's what I'll say.
Nice uniform, too. Buddy.
Number one, 27 carries, 138 yards. He had 1 touchdown. Really, Brandon, and I was up for this game. I wasn't looking like my buddy B.A. after the Cedric Von Prawn commitment earlier this month. But I would say some of the most impressive runs that Milton made in that game, folks, were stuff that got called back by penalty and trash on the field and yellow flags. I mean, really, he had some more highlight plays against Narbonne. And let me be clear here: Narbonne has several elite 4-star and 3-star prospects going to big schools on their roster, and a lot of those guys on the defensive line. And Buchanan and Milton really represented well for a season opener.
How about Elias Ricks here, IMG Academy? This is a new school for him, but a big performance.
Yeah, first of all, you got to stay away from Rick's Island. He does
the quarterback
this.
threw it right to it.
Yeah, there's better angles of this where he reads this play better. People don't give him enough credit how he closes on the ball and reads this play due to his assignments in the scheme. But when you have a player that good that transfers into IMG Academy, the corner on the other side is Legend Cavazos.
Yeah. Is he going to play corner to Ohio State?
Yeah, I think he wants to play corner at Ohio State, yeah. And I think Elias Ricks is going to play corner wherever he goes as well, even though I think he'd be a natural early freshman year star candidate at the right school.
So can we do this every week? Is this too much work?
Well, it's work.
Show some highlights.
It's work, but
it's fun.
Hopefully
we should just do the whole show looking at highlights.
Hopefully we'll get some of them before my man Brandon takes them up for Dog Nation Daily in the big show. We get called up to the minors.
I make no promises. So, all right, before we get ready to wrap up here, now there'll be plenty of six-packs consumed this upcoming weekend as part of Dog Nation Libations. I love that. Before that, how about the Kroger six-pack? You want to share your own version of the six-pack here this week?
Yes, sir. But first, can we play, every time Brandon mentions Dog Nation Libations now, can we play the Brandon theme song? Can we cue the Brandon theme music?
Are you kidding me off the top here? Now, that is an appropriate use of that.
Appropriate use.
Dog Nation Libations almost got a nice guffaw out of me. Pretty good there. I like that.
All right, six-pack. Let's crack it open.
Let's do it.
What are we talking about this week, sir?
I'm assuming season openers.
Are we talking about season openers? Are we talking about tight ends? Or are we talking about Vanderbilt?
Oh, hopefully not Vanderbilt, but okay.
We're talking about Vanderbilt, sir. There we go.
All right, go ahead.
Guffaw number one. Let's have a guffaw meter right here. Although it says top 2020 targets, we're still talking about six-packs right here. How many games did Georgia beat Vanderbilt during the first 15 times these two schools played one another?
Are we literally going back to 1892?
1893 was the first meeting.
Oh, my gosh, Jeff. Why? There's so many things we can be talking about.
First of all, look at. Can you give me credit for putting them in numerical order?
I am happy with that. They're at least in chronological order. They beat them 1 out of 15, 4 out of 15, 8 out of 15, 12 out of 15. So Vanderbilt was really good in 1920. I don't think Georgia had a legitimately good team until 42, right? No good teams.
2016 was pretty sporty. The 1926 team was pretty sporty.
Are you being serious?
I'm being serious.
For Georgia or Vanderbilt?
For Georgia. They claimed a national title right around that year.
What?
It's
I've
not.
never heard that.
It's not one of the. It's like one of those Alabama national titles.
Okay,
the Weekly Reader Poll or Scholastic America.
This is playing at Hurdy Field. This is pre-Sanford Stadium.
Pre-Sanford Stadium. Yes.
So I'm assuming the answer is low here, just based on the basis of I think Vanderbilt was better pre. This is almost pre-World War I. I almost said pre-war. This is pre-World War I. Almost.
Correct.
So I'm going to say it's like 1 or 4. I'll say 4 out of 15. 4 out of 15.
Let's take a look one more time.
Is that even one of the choices? 4 out of 15?
That is one of the choices, sir.
I'll say it's 4 out of 15. Jimmy Guthrie says that too.
What's our YouTube nation?
James Crump also heard that Georgia won a national championship in 1926. I had not heard that. Yeah, so 4 out of 15. That answer is B. What do you say?
Brandon, you got it right, sir.
All right, there you go. There you go. All right, how about question number 2?
All right, Brandon's working off his Dog Nation libations right now. True or false? It took 30 years of playing the Commodores before Georgia was able to produce a 4-game win streak against them.
I'm going to say probably true. It seems like that's what other people probably say there as well. Wally Roberts reminded us that Larry Munson used to be the play-by-play man for Vanderbilt back in the day. Chadwick Ivory says C. Why don't you tell us the answer?
If people are having fun with some of our comments so far. Looking back on it, the correct answer, Brandon, is actually false. The Bulldogs only needed 29 meetings to do that.
Fascinating.
Wanted to give you a little bit of sense of history.
Fascinating.
Brandon wants to change the channel already.
There's nothing better than knowing instead of 30 years, only 29 years. Nothing better in a trivia question than that.
We would also love for Brandon to produce.
I need a Dog Nation libation right now.
Brandon could get a Dog Nation libation every week during the six-pack.
Miles Skedsveld also brings a good point. The fact that the correct answers are highlighted in red is a little bit disconcerting. Typically, that's the wrong answer.
It's a red and black show, sir.
I can get down with that too, I guess.
Number 3. Which number is greater? Here I go, Brandon. We got some math here.
Oh, my gosh.
The number of times that Georgia has beaten Vanderbilt since 1961. Or B, the number of times that Vandy has scored 28 points against Georgia since 28 or more points against Georgia since 1961.
Has there been a high-scoring game that Vanderbilt lost? I think I'm going to say there's more examples of Vanderbilt beating Georgia since 61 than there are Vanderbilt scoring 28 points. Am I saying it right?
Yeah.
I think there's actually more Vandy wins than there are high-scoring Vandy performances. I believe I'm right about that because 2006 was a low-scoring game. 2016 was a low-scoring game. You know, the Vanderbilt wins. 94 was that 94 or 95? One of those last Goff years. Seems like that was a relatively low-scoring game. You can think back to a Vandy win, but a high-scoring game against Vanderbilt doesn't come to mind very much. Leon Hutchinson, pretty much everybody kind of agreeing with me on that. So we're going to say there's more Vandy wins than high-scoring Vandy games.
Brandon, let's see what the clouds reveal. The number of times that Georgia has beaten Vanderbilt since 61. Answer, Vanderbilt has 7 wins in the series since 61. The Commodores have scored 28 or more points against Georgia on just 6 occasions across that span.
Okay.
People know that this is a lopsided series. I'm just trying to give clarity to an impression to make sure folks are not misguided.
Is that what we're doing?
Trying to make them reach for a Dog Nation libation with Cranky over here right now.
Are we more clear after all of this? How about question number 4?
Number 4. He would have been better off if I would have said who invented the candy bar out of Vanderbilt or something like that. Which one of these elements is hogwash in the Georgia-Vanderbilt series history?
So looking for something untrue here.
Vanderbilt has scored between 13 and 17 points in the last 5 meetings between the teams.
Seems like that could be true.
Georgia has never beaten Vanderbilt by more than 45 points. Vanderbilt has never beaten a UGA team that won at least 9 games.
That's a good question.
Vanderbilt only beat Georgia one time between 1962 and 1990.
All right, so this is actually a pretty good one. I think the incorrect answer is A. It seems like they've been low scoring, but Georgia not beating them by more than 45 seems like it could be about right. Vanderbilt not beating a 9-win Georgia team seems about right. Only one time between 62 and 90 seems about right, although that streak would have continued. Did Georgia lose in 90 to Vanderbilt? I don't remember that.
91.
No. Oh, yeah, they did. You're right. They did. They did. So I'm going to say the one that's wrong is A.
Brandon.
Timothy Burleson, you got to say D. That's a C.
I was trying to go for my Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade voice when I wanted to say, Brandon, you chose unwisely.
Sure.
You remember that show? Remember that movie?
So the 91, you're counting obviously the bowl win, which would be fair to do because that was 8-3 regular season. So, all right, that's cool.
2 9-win teams. I think.
Wait, did Georgia win 9 in 2006?
They did.
Okay.
Flashback to that question.
They had a flurry late in the year to get to 9.
I want to show folks a couple of things about what we were going through there. 62 and 90, that's right. So literally somebody could have been 38 years old and never seen Georgia lose to Vanderbilt. 28 years old. Vanderbilt has scored between 13 and 17 in the last 5. Georgia.
There's a lot of low-scoring performances from the Commodores.
I think it's 13, 17, and 14. Georgia, the biggest victory Georgia had ever had against Vanderbilt was a 45-point win. And then Vanderbilt has never beaten a UGA team that won at least 9. We just debunked that one right there. That one was the hogwash.
Yeah, that's good.
Moving right along. Next question, our 6-pack. Let us know, folks, how you're doing. And this is one that Brandon wants to see every week.
Yeah.
The blue chip ratio, which is 4 and 5 star signees between Georgia and Vanderbilt, looks like this, and it dates back to the 2016 class.
I don't understand this at all.
So the ratio.
What does Vanderbilt have to do with this? Oh, it's 70. Okay, it's a colon 76-5.
The ratio, 76-5. So what we're looking for here is what is the number of 4 and 5 star prospects signed, the ratio between Georgia and Vanderbilt over the last 4 cycles?
I'm going to say it's 76-5. A 76-5. That's what I'm going to say. Armand Rashad says A as well, although Nicholas Harris says C. C seems too low. B seems too ambitious. I believe it's A, 76-5.
Tram Dog has an A off the YouTube crowd. Dallas Schwartz, John Roberson, they all have B's. Bill Kibbe comes in with the B's. A lot of momentum for B's right there.
I think it's too ambitious. Let's find out.
Too ambitious. Let's keep on a hurry tempo pace right here. 76-5.
Yeah, there you go.
Vanderbilt actually signed 3 5-star, 3 4-stars. Let me get this straight. Way ahead of our skis when we have Vanderbilt signing 5 stars.
They've come into Georgia and gotten a 4-star before. They had a little bit of a pipeline to Tucker for a while, I want to say.
But it's funny. Look back at that. The 5 they've signed, they really had to stretch and claw to get to that. They had 3 in 1 year, and I had to count Mr. Vaughn, who was actually a 4-star prospect. But you guys might remember this. He did not choose Vanderbilt out the gate. He was a transfer from Illinois. That gave them 5. And
they've also had plenty of elite individual players. You know, I'm sure Zach Cunningham years prior was not an elite recruit, but didn't get a chance to go to Auburn, which he kind of wanted to. But man, a good player once he got there. They've had a lot of examples of that. Corey Chavis and Jamie Duncan, guys like that over the years.
Another funny thing there is when you look at their best players, the ones that are showing up on that preseason All-SEC love, none of those were one of those 4-star players.
That's very interesting. All right, final question.
Final question. Georgia had 3 times as many players as Vanderbilt on the preseason coaches All-SEC team earlier this summer.
Vanderbilt had to have had 3 make considerations. So just on the basis of that, I'm going to say it's false. 3 times as much when Vanderbilt probably had 3. That would have given Georgia 9. Of course, I guess the preseason they have like 9 teams, first, second, third team and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to give a little love to Vanderbilt, who probably had at least 3, and say that's probably false.
Correct, Brandon. Vanderbilt actually had 4 on the preseason All-SEC team.
I shortchanged them 1.
The Bulldogs, they only finished with 10.
Well, there you go. So really good stuff. It's going to be a great game between Georgia and Vanderbilt on Saturday. Of course, we're going to have plenty of great coverage for you on that on Dog Nation, all the Dog Nation video channels as we head towards that, and Dog Nation Libation from Nashville and Broadway and everywhere else coming up on Friday night. Can't wait to be a part of that. Huge thanks for Kroger for making this show possible. Jeff, I know you're busy in the Dog Nation forum over the course of the next couple of days, and dognation.com. I'll see you Monday morning, I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation daily once again here, podcast, video, everything else. Y'all have a great day, and of course we'll see you back here again next week for Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger as well. We'll talk to you then, everybody.